What is up, guys, and thank you for checking out this next episode. My last episode was with Christian Van Camp, and we went deep into the body, how to take care of it, how to get muscles, and just how to overall help us in a holistic manner to take care of the body. This episode is from my man Nathan Barna. He is also a physical specimen, but he's also very deep into the mind, the spirit, as well as the soul. So I wanted to juxtapose these two back to back to give you a sense of what goodDEMAND is about. It's about developing the body as well as developing the mind and spirit, and just overall optimizing our lives to live the best way we possibly can. And if you want to support the podcast, I have a brand new shirt out. It is this one here. And I got inspired for this shirt by John William Godward. I saw his marvelous, ginormous painting in the Getty in LA here, and it was fabulous. And this is my own rendition of his work right there. He paints beautiful women in marble with fur, and I love that style, so I made my own rendition of it. And if you'd like to support the podcast, it is on my website, goodDEMAND.org. There will be obviously a link in the bio. Thank you guys for watching. I just wanted to juxtapose this past episode with Christian Van Camp to this one, so we get the body and we get the spirit and the mind, and it's all intertwined. Thank you guys very much for watching, and enjoy the episode. Okay, Nate, my man, how are you doing today?
Okay. I'm
Awesome.
doing amazing.
Awesome, bro. So you're in Indiana, right?
Yes, sir.
I love that. So I wanted to start today by kind of explaining why I kind of wanted to interview today, and kind of just get your ideas and see if we can help others with them. One of the biggest things that I've seen in you is that you've kind of mastered the physical as well as the spiritual. You're very deep into both, and that is something that I admire very much. And then it's also this type of phenomenon that I've seen where people that go into health, go into fitness, go into like some kind of wellness, also start, delving deep into the physical and the metaphysical. Is there some way you can explain that phenomenon or how that happened to you?
Yeah, so, just from my own personal experience, I got into the physical side of things in high school, like pretty typical, like I was playing sports, and I was a typical high school dude. I wanted to bench press 315 and just, blast my bis and tris every day and like look good for the ladies kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I realized pretty early on that, there was a lot more that went into it than just going to the gym, because I was pretty self-initiative in the sense that I would, if I was trying to figure out a problem, I would start to go and do research. I'd start, looking at different people. I was on YouTube, finding different ebooks. And so I realized pretty early on that if I really wanted to maximize my physical strength, I had to start looking at these other things. And really it started out as simple as like, hey, if I don't stay up till 2 a.m. playing video games with my friends and I went to bed a little earlier, that's going to make me feel better and I'm going to perform better in the gym. And then that kind of trickled into like, okay, hey, let me look at my diet. If I stop eating, pizza rolls and Kraft Singles, ham sandwiches,
Yeah.
then I might feel a little better and I'll again perform better in the gym. So it always kind of, all these different steps really correlated back to, is this going to help me be a better athlete? And then that eventually led into like meditation, because it was like, okay, if I can manage my mind and emotions better, that can help me alleviate a lot of different sources of stress that I'm ultimately just creating for myself. And so once I went down that path and I started seeing the benefits of like, oh, this actually has a way more wide-reaching effect than just the physical. And then from there, I think there was like an initial spark maybe around like 17, because I went through a bit of a crisis at that point, because I moved locations. It was my senior year of high school, and usually when you're in high school, you kind of identify yourself with all your friends and the things that you're doing and the academics. And then I moved my senior year and all that was stripped away from me. And I was kind of in this very lost place and I got super depressed. And that's when I really like doubled down on the training, because that's really all I had. That was like the one area of my life I felt like I had some kind of control in and influence in. And so I went all in on that. And then that really sparked me to start going deeper and deeper and deeper into nutrition, into managing the mind and emotions, which eventually led into the metaphysical realms. I started to realize more and more of, just as simple as, the food that I eat, that's kind of one connection I have with this seeming outside world, which, that goes back into the soil, which, is just ultimately the earth, which is, the earth is a product of this solar system, which is the product of this galaxy. And so even at that kind of logical level, I was able to start to connect these dots to say, okay, it kind of all goes back to the same stuff. And me being very, widely interested in a lot of different areas, every thread that I started to pull on, whether that was, strength and conditioning, whether that was nutrition, whether that was like music or whatever it was, all these different threads just started leading back to the same place, which is kind of that underlying message, like, hey, this is all connected in one way or another. And therefore, the more I can tune into myself, the more my sense of self begins to expand to encompass all of these other things. And therefore, if I can gain more awareness of all these things that may have previously been unconscious, then that allows me to have more of an influence on the reality that I'm creating for myself, whether that's just being a really good athlete or building a business or, making music or whatever kind of endeavor I find myself in.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's kind of how I began too. And I've seen people, it's like that nutrition part too, right? You start thinking about like, well, if I'm trying to be the best person I can be on the inside, let me start thinking about what the stuff I'm putting inside my body. And then little by little, that kind of trickles down into God, pretty fast. It's pretty awesome. And that's one reason why I always like to start with the physical, because I feel like the physical is where we could all relate to. Everybody wants to be a little thinner, a little buffer, a little faster, a little bit more confident, like, the root chakra type, like those needs and wants in the physical world. But that's perfect because that kind of starts that path all the way up to our higher sense of self and our higher sense of being. Dude, that's I love that. I wanted to ask as well, there's different ways people are connected with God. And some people choose, religion, established religions, and other people choose, spirituality, which, some people scoff at and just be like, oh, spirituality, what the fuck does that even mean? Like, what is that? Is it just too fluid? Not enough structure, right? What do you think is the difference between them? Are they just tools? Are they paths that grow from one another? Are they synonymous? Well, what do you think about those two?
Referring to the difference between spirituality and religion.
Yeah.
So for me, religion, it can be a very useful tool. And I'm sure you've listened to like Paul Chek, where he talks about, and just the word religion is like, it's re-linking back to a whole.
Yeah.
And so, taking it at its, fundamental basis, it really, they're pretty related, where it's, you're linking back to a whole. But kind of in this context, whether that's, Christianity or Judaism or Islam, whatever that tool is, it, depending on how you approach it, I mean, I believe it can be a starting point, because if you kind of, refer to like Ken Wilber, like the different structure stages of consciousness, and depending on where somebody is at, having some kind of structured, like, hey, these are some guidelines, like here's a way, just like, you go to the gym and you have no clue what you're doing, and you go to talk to a trainer or a coach or somebody, and it's like, hey, here's this program, here's this outline, and if you follow this program, it's going to help you get closer to where you want to be. But a lot of times, you have to, also have that, the fine print there, like, this program isn't going to work forever. It might help you get to a certain point, but
so
ultimately
good,
the underlying principles of why this program works, if you can start to understand those, and by going through the program, ideally you start to have this direct experience of how these different variables, how these different stories play out, then once you understand the principles, now you can start to apply it all over. And that's where I think the religion can, in this context, turn into the spirituality if you don't close it off. And, in the analogy that we're using with the program, it's like if you don't just stick to that one program and try to make it work for the rest of your life, because ultimately you're going to limit yourself. And so, like with the different structure stages of consciousness, some people, depending on where they're at, they need that kind of, set in stone, hey, follow these guidelines, which will ultimately act as the gateway to the higher development and the evolution of the consciousness. It's just if you get stuck, which a lot of the way that our kind of corporatized religion is set up is, here's this way of doing things, here's this program, and you're not really, don't look outside of this program. This is the one way of doing things. This is the true way. And if you look outside of it, then, a lot of different beliefs like, sin, or you're going to go to hell, or whatever you got to, confess, or whatever that might be. So I think religion can be a very healthy thing if it is taken as like, here's this starting place that can ultimately unfold into a greater and greater understanding of yourself and the world, or the universe, or God, or whatever that is. And then spirituality on the other side, which is kind of the path that I more so fell into, because I was raised Catholic. And so I kind of like very early on, I kind of had this, like, in a sense, this distaste, mainly because it felt like things were just being pushed on me without really having a say of like, I don't really want to I don't want to go to church every Sunday. Like, I don't want to necessarily believing these things just because I'm told that I should be believing in these things. And like, I started asking deeper questions, and then that kind of led me to, at first it was like this rejection. It was like, I don't want any part of that. Which then led me into kind of the spirituality path, which really for me was just ultimately connecting to myself, which then started to expand my sense of self into connecting to a greater and greater and greater whole, to ultimately, you get to a place where it's just, it's all one thing, or it's all no thing.
How do you recommend for people to get that connection? Is meditation the only way? I mean, what do you I'm sure people ask you a lot of questions at the gym, whatever, because you're very different, So I'm sure you get that question like, hey, how could I just, get a little deeper?
Yeah. Honestly, the thing that naturally arises and that comes up so often is just finding something that you're passionate about. Doing something that you love to do. Because in my experience, when you find that thing, and a lot of times we already know what that is, we just may have been kind of conditioned out of it. Like, a lot of times, if you look back to when you were 5, 6, 7 years old and you were asked, like, what are you going to be when you grow up? You kind of already had this idea of what you wanted to do. And so finding things that you're passionate about, and again, it doesn't matter what that is, I believe that can start to initiate that process. Because again, I fell in love with lifting weights. I was very passionate about that. And because of that, it led me into a path of wanting to be better and better and better at it, because I wanted to keep doing it. And plus, I enjoyed the process of it. So I was willing to continue to show up. I was willing to go through the inevitable challenges that are present in any kind of meaningful endeavor. And so I think that's like one of the easiest starting places, because when you initiate that path, the meditation, the Tai Chi, the doing any kind of studying and research, that kind of stuff kind of comes in place on its own once you begin to become invested in that path. And if you love what you do, then you're likely going to want to keep doing it. And so you're going to, start to fall into those different practices.
It's like the hero's journey, right? It's
exactly.
Like you get a path and you get the choice to engage with it or to like deny it, right? But that engaging with life actively furthers, the play of learning of what this all really is. And like, okay, oh shit, I learned something new. And like, you have to dig deep into yourself and pray and connect with God. I love that one. How about, this is one that I'm not sure exactly where it comes from. It might be a Hindu type of saying, but like trying to get closer to what reality truly is. I have found in my life that if I keep doing my best to kind of just see reality for what it is, I get a better feeling of a deeper connection with God in the way that it challenges me to, accept the things that I truly don't like. I've been through hard, relationships before or hard breakups, and like being able to accept the fact that like, hey, this is done. And it's like, ooh, like that is something I don't want to accept at all. However, accepting that opens my eyes to like, hey, what's possible out here, what God has laid out for all of us, what the rules are. And I always felt like a deeper connection through just trying to demystify our reality and just try to see it for what it truly is. Have you kind of seen that for yourself to be true, or have heard anything like that before?
Yeah. For me, it's like this constant evolution, because I'm sure as you've experienced, you kind of go through one challenge, which provides a certain perspective, provides certain lessons, certain opportunities for growth. And usually it's always the times when you think you got shit figured out. It's like, that's exactly when the next thing pops up. So it's kind of it's like this balance of, okay, here are these general principles I can kind of, I can fall back on and rely on, but always staying open to the possibility that I could be completely wrong. And like, I could completely shift my ideas, the next moment or the next day or whatever the next, challenge arises. And honestly, we'll probably come back to the same theme over and over again, but that's why I love lifting, because it has become this grounding force for my spiritual life. Because, 405 pounds is always going to be 405 pounds. And so it doesn't matter how cool my ideas are, how many books I read, like how cool, I can sound talking about, spirituality and metaphysical things. I always have that direct feedback on, is this actually working? And, you can take that into all the other areas of your life, your finances, your relationships, your, mental and emotional health. And that's kind of like when you were talking about the reality. And I guess in my lens, it's like, okay, you have all the ideas and the things that you believe in, and then you have kind of your real felt experience that you're going through, and how is that matching up?
Yeah.
I think like Rudolf Steiner, I kind of use his term like the story gap, where it's like
the
story gap.
The story
gap. Yeah.
Story gap. Okay.
Basically like the gap in between, what you tell yourself about how things are and how you think things should be, and then the actual reality of what you're experiencing. Yeah. To the extent that those things don't line up, that's what you call the story gap.
Ooh, I love that.
Which is cool, because that creates, there's a tension there, which is which then starts to provide the catalyst to help you grow.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the hero's journey, because you can choose to see those catalysts as opportunities to grow and use them as such, or you can just, victimize yourself, distract yourself, numb yourself, keep telling yourself everything's cool, while in reality, things aren't going the way that you ideally want them to go.
Okay, I love that. So you're saying the potential's on the ends or in between?
Well, just like a polarity, like if you have a positive and a negative, like a circuit, that creates the differential which creates the tension
I
that
see.
allows the energy to transfer. So it's like if
I
everything
see.
was always going amazingly well, then you wouldn't really have a reference point to know if there's any kind of changes or adjustments to make. Like if everything,
Got
like
it.
if it was always, if there was only good, we would have no reference point to know what bad is, and vice versa. If there wasn't any of what we label as bad, there wouldn't be a reference point to know what good is. So like we need that tension, but if we don't do the work to, you know, recognize it and to, you know, better align ourselves, it's just like balance. It's always, if you're completely in balance and completely perfect, then, you know, paradoxically, there's no you to have that experience anymore.
Whoa, yeah.
So it's always a functional balance between the, you know, the yin and the yang, masculine, feminine, positive, negative.
Yeah. That's something that I can kind of like, the first thing that kind of popped in my head was that I feel like that's the moment when I really became an adult, when I was able to call myself out on my bullshit. I think growing up, I don't know exactly what it was, but I always felt like I had to defend myself. Like, I didn't do good on the test because the teacher sucks, you know, like, and then as I grew up, I kind of, I got told by a cousin of mine who I love dearly. He was like, hey, why don't you do this instead? Why, instead of blaming it on the professor now, while you got the bad grade, why don't you write down all the things you did have control of? Like, why don't you write down, you could have studied more, you could have used office hours. Did you do all the homework? Did you ask questions? And I think I was about 19 at that time. And I think that's the first time I took responsibility for myself and used my creative ability to like come up with how I could have called myself out of my bullshit instead of just blaming it on somebody else. So that's kind of the story gap between what I could have done and what I blamed it on. Interesting.
Wise cousin.
Yeah, it was great. Do you have a moment for like that for yourself? Or I think that is a great, not only life lesson, but a perspective to have in life where it's like, hey, like, you know, I don't want to say everything in my life is completely my fault. Sure, there's random occurrences and there's things that are there for me that I can't understand now. But to a certain extent, I do have a lot of control over my life to guide it in the direction, have a lot of effort, have a lot of energy to make sure things go potentially the way how I want them to go. Do you have a moment like that for yourself where you came to realize that as well?
Yeah, I think that goes back to when I was 17, that transition period of my life. And I've had quite a few of those, but that was kind of the first like major one that really sticks out for me. And I kind of distinctly remember I was sitting in class. It was like English class or something, you know, my senior year. And I just absolutely, like, I hated it. And I was very good at school. Like I had all straight A's and like, it was, you know, it came relatively natural for me to just remember things and then regurgitate them on tests to get good grades.
Yeah.
But I remember I was there and it was after that initial awakening of, hey, I can give myself permission to do what I want with my life. Because once I was removed from my just normal, you know, I had my friend group and the sports and everything that I was accustomed to, that was all removed, and I was really just by myself. And then I finally started asking myself, like, what do I want? Like, I'm doing all these things that everybody's telling me that I should want and that I should be doing, but what is it that I actually want? And I started reading, it was Ralph Waldo Emerson and Osho.
Oh, nice. Were you a fan of Elliot Hulse, by the way?
Yep.
Yep.
I got into him too. And I think it was like a combination. And I think he probably got me into the Osho and the Ralph Waldo Emerson, if I'm remembering right. But yeah, it is like all these different sources started confirming my just innate intuition of you can do whatever the fuck you want to do. And if you completely fall on your face, like so what? You'll either get back up and you'll learn something, or the thing that really helped me, almost paradoxically, is I figured just even logically, the worst thing that could possibly happen is I, at least in my eyes at that time, is I die. And it's
God
like,
damn.
Yeah.
Hey, worst thing that could happen, I'm fucking dead.
And then I was like,
That's
in
kind
that
of bad.
perspective, it was like, in that perspective, it was like, well, then it doesn't matter anyways. It's like, if I'm going to die either way,
Yeah.
I'd
Might as well
rather
just do it.
die doing on my terms, doing things on my terms. And so it really just gave me that permission to just go all in. I was like, fuck it. And I almost dropped out of high school because I was so,
Oh shit.
I had such a conviction of like, I'm just going to go all in doing what I love to do. And, you listen to enough Elliot Hulse at that time, you'll do anything.
Oh, I love Elliot.
But yeah, and I ended up like taking some online classes just to finish the last little credits that I had. But yeah, I was checked out. I was done. But yeah, that was probably one of the big turning points where I really started to take that personal responsibility for my life.
That's so soon, dude.
Yeah, well,
that's so soon. What was it? Wow, yeah. Did your parents freak out? What did your parents think?
Yeah, a little bit, but I think they knew me well enough to have trust in my path, even if they didn't necessarily like, they couldn't really make sense of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I did drop out of college. I had like a full ride academic scholarship.
Wow.
And then I almost didn't go. And then I was like, well, everybody tells me I should be going, so let me try it out. And then I did like half of a semester, and it was good because it was affirmation of
what you already knew.
what I already knew, where it's like, I kind of can see the end of this road here, and it's not what I want for myself. And I was like, I can either, do this for 4 years and like then start my life, or I can just start my life now. And, I might disappoint some people. Like, yeah, my parents were disappointed, but once they saw like my drive and my motivation to really, even though I had no clue what I was doing, at least I was making an effort to grow and to develop myself and to move towards doing more and more of what I love to do. Once they saw that, they kind of understood, and they kind of let me, find my way. So I'm very grateful for my parents for, giving me that space.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've realized like, I also, once going through that, I realized the value of voluntarily putting yourself in positions that in a sense force you to succeed, or just force you to figure the shit out. And that's kind of a principle that I've, utilized in a lot of different areas of my life, where it's like, I just go all in, and then I'll figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Versus, trying to come up, let me find the perfect plan, and I need to, have everything aligned, and then I'll take action. It's like, no, just take action, and then you can figure the shit out along the way.
Dude, that's a lot of wisdom there. I can relate to both, where I've had instances in my life where I'm like, let me make sure everything's good. I got to get the right stuff. Okay, let's plan this out. And then like, I think sometimes that's a lot of fear. Like, you're procrastinating because you're afraid. So let me do the smaller things to hopefully not only distract myself, but maybe the fear will go away. And I've also had instances where it's like, dude, just fucking jump.
Yeah.
And then if you
and
if you
learn
die,
how
you
to
die.
fly on the way down. Yep.
Exactly. So growing up, I wasn't very religious at all. However, my grandmother kind of instilled in me compassion, more so empathy, and I feel like growing up, that matured me in a certain way as a kid and as a young adult and as an adult now, to really like understand other people's perspectives in life. And I feel like that expanded me spiritually as well, being able to understand how somebody else is feeling, being able to empathize with somebody's emotions, and at the first stage of my life, it made me I still think I'm very empathic. And I was a little too soft. Eventually I had to grow out of that. However, I still think it was a great benefit. Something else that I recently took upon myself was gratitude. So every day I have an alarm for 6:30 a.m., 12 a.m., 12 p.m., 3, 5, and 8. And just to be grateful, like just for 30 seconds, just like, hey, thank you for, having a computer in front of me, having a beautiful microphone to talk to, having someone I can, converse with, just anything that's in front of my eyes, right? And that has, expanded my life again. And I feel much more lucky. I feel much more like life and God are on my side. What would you call those? Would you call those like virtues? Like just even these two things, like compassion and gratitude. I know there's a lot more. What would you call those in your own life experience?
I think virtues is a good term to encompass that, and really, I guess defining a virtue as a skill or a practice or a capacity that can be developed and instilled and be able to practice within your life. And that's when you're saying that, it kind of naturally arose in me, because I feel like I've had the opposite experience where, like, now, because I've had to learn very early on to just figure shit out and just kind of be in my, express the warrior archetype and just get shit done. And now I'm kind of, seeing the strengths of that and what that's been able to create. But, all that fire, if there's all that fire and no, earth grounding, which I'm pretty grounded, but especially the water element is one of the, the thing that I've have to continually practice within myself. So it's like now I'm kind of having to learn how to be softer and how to be more empathetic and, understanding of other people's perspectives and their emotions. And, like, I'm grateful for my girlfriend for being that mirror for me, because she's, basically that, like the opposite of that. And so she's constantly, we're able to be mirrors for each other in that way. But to answer your question, I think, those are virtues, just like, like courage and just like discipline and resilience and persistence and all those other types of things that you can develop in your life. And whether that's, specific practices, like you said, you have the gratitude practice, which I guess, because it's kind of arises in me, I'll just share it. One of the things, like, whenever there's, at least I've learned in my personal experience in working with people, if there's any one of those virtues that you feel like you want to develop more of, kind of in the same way that you took the initiative to have those reminders for your gratitude, I kind of call it, what are the simplest yet the highest leverage actions and habits that you can develop that will help you cultivate whatever that virtue is. So for instance, if you have a hard time, sticking to a program and going to the gym, if that's something you feel like is, necessary for you in your journey, but you find you have a hard time maintaining that discipline or whatever you want to call it, being able to continuously show up, then maybe the goal isn't to necessarily try to commit to, I'm going to go to the gym for 4 days a week and I'm going to, work out for an hour all those days. Maybe it's, I'm just going to make it my goal to show up to the gym, because that seems more realistic to me. Or if even that is a struggle, what if, even finding a different area of your life that is more approachable, like making your bed, committing yourself to making your bed every single day. Because even though it may not seem like it has anything to do with the gym, you're developing that virtue of discipline, which can then carry out over into all the other areas of your life, because it's not so much about what you're doing, and this is, Elliot Hulse-isk. It's not so much about what you're doing, it's who you are. It's who you're becoming. Who you're being. Because if you already are that person, naturally your thoughts, your actions, and then the results that you're getting from that are going to be in line with that.
Yeah, that's so cool. I remember this morning, Bob Proctor?
Oh, that sounds familiar, but
white guy, glasses, so. It's The Secret.
Okay, yep.
Anyways, I have this thing where I get like daily videos and whatnot, and today's video was on procrastination, and he said, stop procrastinating even on the little things, because you're giving energy towards a bad habit, which is procrastinating. So the inverse is true then. If you just give energy to, let's say the simplest one was making your bed, then you're actually giving energy to those good habits of, hey, I'm going to do this. I said I'm going to do this, et cetera, et cetera. And to anybody out there who's, struggling with that, I struggled with a lot of that, like really bad, like where it's like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then it just like doesn't happen. And I'm like, you beat yourself up. It's like fucked up. I think literal small steps. Like I remember I had to tell myself like, all right, I'm going to take 3 breaths. Like that's how little it had to start. Like just 3 fucking breaths. And sometimes I doze off and I'm like, 3 breaths, motherfucker. Like, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So giving energy and letting that momentum build up.
Yep.
Right?
Momentum, yes.
I kind of lost myself in that, which was good. Abundance is one that I've heard you talk about, and I think that is also one of these like virtues or maybe perspectives. Could you give us some like explanation of how to be abundant? I feel like we live in a world that is telling us that shit is scarce, that we need to somehow find things outside of us, that we need to compete tooth and nail to get the things that we truly want out of life. Could you kind of give us a little lesson on that?
Yeah. So first and foremost, this is a constant practice for me. And I think to start, it goes back to your gratitude practice. One thing I learned from studying Tony Robbins is, he says, what's wrong is always available, and so is what's right. And even looking at quantum physics, there's a saying in quantum physics, how you view is what you see. So what you choose to focus on, what you choose is really what you choose to pay attention to, is what you're choosing to put energy into. And so the more you're putting energy into things that you don't want, because you're focusing on the things that are maybe going wrong, or you're focusing on the things that you don't want to happen. It's like, oh, I don't want to lose money, or, what if I go broke, or what if I don't have this, or what if I'm not good enough to do that? You keep focusing on those things, you're continuing to put your attention there, and you're continuing to put energy there, and you're just going to keep mirroring those back to you. And it's, it can be challenging because there's so many things that are happening on the subconscious and unconscious level. Because again, you can tell yourself all day, like, I am abundant, I am abundant, I am abundant. But if the way that you're breathing, if the relationships that you're engaging in, looking at your, the things you're engaging with on your phone, your, social media, or whatever is TV, your screen, if all these other messages and all this information is coming in that is saying otherwise, then that's going to have a huge impact no matter how much you're telling yourself, I am abundant, I am abundant, I am abundant. And so for me, I can just share my personal experience in this evolution. It's first and foremost been a practice of the reminding myself every single day, like I do my Tai Chi practice, which goes back to just the small little disciplines. Just in the same way, you have the discipline to do your meditation or for your gratitude or to do movement and to breathe. It's the same kind of habit that you can build when it comes to abundance and reminding yourself to shift your focus. And going with that, the meditation practice, again, that can look like a lot of different things, but whatever that practice is that allows you to cultivate that witness element of yourself, that part of you that can just see what's going on objectively, that can see your thoughts without necessarily being caught up in your thoughts, being able to strengthen that capacity is what's going to give you that ability to see like, oh, I'm spending a lot of energy, I'm spending a lot of, thought focusing on things I don't want. And so it's no wonder that I'm getting that back. And so once you recognize the thought patterns, you can also then start to recognize the emotions behind the thought patterns. And that's when you really can start to tap in to the subconscious, where a lot of the driving force really is. Because like a very easy example is, how do you feel when you pay a big bill? Or how do you feel when you pull up your bank account on your phone? Do you feel this sense of like closed offness and like you feel this sense of dread and just basically overall reinforcing this sense of scarcity? Or do you feel this sense of expansion? And a real easy practice that I've been developing and practicing for myself is every time that I, spend money, I cultivate this sense of expansion, and I put meaning behind it, as in like I am expanding myself. I'm putting money, I'm helping other people. I am grateful to be able to have the resources, because again, when we spend money, we usually tend to think of, oh, losing. I had this money and I just lost it when I spent it. But instead you can focus on, hey, I actually have this money to be able to spend on whatever it is that I choose to spend it on. And so those are a few of the practices that have really helped me. And then there's also been, I had one kind of significant experience that I'll share that really just provided this visceral experience of abundance. And it was really simple too. It was just last year, my girlfriend and I, Taylor, we went to Apple Orchard to pick some apples. And when I got there and like I saw all of the apple trees and they were all just overflowing with apples, and I just had this realization that even if I wanted to, I couldn't even eat all of these apples in my lifetime, even if I tried. And this is just one little apple orchard.
Yeah.
And just having that realization that there's like, because you can plant one apple seed that can produce a whole apple tree that can produce all of these apples over and over and over again, with all having their own seeds. And so nature herself gives us these keys that it's all already there. But you go to the store and you look at apples and you might see this bag of apples that maybe has like 8 apples in it, and it's like, $4 or $5.99, whatever it is. And so we've been conditioned to attach this certain value to certain things. And now it's like, okay, there's this bag of apples that is worth this much, and if I don't have this much, then I can't have that bag of apples. I can't buy that bag of apples, or I can only have so many apples because I only have so much money. So just like the system itself that we've been, indoctrinated into is constantly, like you said, is constantly reinforcing this idea of, scarcity and lack. When if you really go out in nature, and that's another practice too, like just go out in nature, like go into the middle of a forest and see all the abundance of life all around you. And so you can have that direct experience of, oh, it's already all right here. and then creating the practices around that to be that continual reminder, and then paying attention to the emotions that are attached to the different actions and the different thoughts that you have around abundance, or, you know, those feelings of lack or scarcity, and then recognizing that you can always choose what you focus on.
Yeah. I know we both studied holistic health, and it's just so refreshing and like such a reminder, and it's just mind-boggling how like little things like having a perspective of abundance or having a perspective of scarcity can manifest into our own physical health. How that mentality could lead to a life with a ton of stress or a stress-free life. And like the idea will manifest physically into our body, into our expression, and literally into our physical world, whether you feel like you're abundant, so I buy stuff, I give freely, and you can see everything I have, and energy is expanding, and I give, versus like, oh no, like I don't, no, don't even buy anything, don't even touch that, like it's closed off and it expresses, physically, and it's just every time I get into that, it like, oh fuck yeah, like it's just so cool, everything's so interconnected to each other.
Yeah, well, it's all the same shit, and that's, if you can start with the feeling, because that's the cool thing too. It's like you don't have to wait until, oh, I got this much money in my bank account, I've got all these things, and it's like now I can feel abundant. When actually, in my experience, it works in reverse. It's like if you can learn how to cultivate that feeling, because the cool thing is you can use your imagination and you can imagine what does it feel like if I were projecting myself into this ideal situation. Like, what does it feel like to feel abundant? And you can literally just, do a meditation and feel what that feels like. And if you learn how to just continually cultivate that experience within yourself, your thoughts are going to start matching that. And then ultimately your experience of your external reality is going to start matching that, because it's mirror, the internal and the external become mirrors of one another.
Yeah. That's something I wanted to talk about too. And is it, when we're changing ourselves, I think everybody has a parts that they need to accept about themselves, and there's parts of them that they want to change. And two ways that I've come across are visualization, like using your imagination of like, hey, I'm this type of person, this is who I want to be, this is how I want to live, and this is what I aspire to do in our mind's eye. And then there's, being and vibrating, and you just said that, like, I'm going to bring in those feelings now, feel more confident. Like, I'm going to feel that right now. And in this situation where I'm not confident, I'm going to somehow tap into that confident feeling, act like if I were confident, and like fight with that discomfort inside until I fucking am. I think there's a cognitive dissonance. Your body like knows you're like, hey, you're not confident right now, but you're trying to be confident. And it's like, Bob Proctor also talks a lot about that. So within changing ourselves, what do you recommend for people? Is it like both? I think it's a little bit of both, of like seeing yourself there, feeling it here, and then entangling yourself to what you want, and then feeling it now to bring it here,
Mm-hmm. No, I love that you brought that up, because that's a lot of the work that I've been doing recently, and kind of like moving into that and really kind of asking myself that same question of, is it all just, I can feel it, I can experience it, kind of like the, Napoleon Hill, like Think and Grow Rich, where I can just be it, think it, experience it, and then it'll manifest in my world, versus the other end of the spectrum where it's like, I'm going to do everything that I possibly can, take all the actions, develop all the different habits, create all the different structures, and, use my will, my faculty of will, to make shit happen, and then have the experience when I see it manifested in my physical reality. And what I've learned is usually whenever I find myself in an either or situation, I always ask myself, is there the possibility for both? Because there usually always is the possibility for both. So I think it's a little bit of both. And one of the things that has helped me kind of conceptualize this when it comes to change is, firstly, that I'll share is everything is already exactly how it is supposed to be. Because one of the very first kind of hiccups or things that we experience when it comes to change is we create this resistance within ourselves because we have this idea of what we want, and then we have this, experience of where we're at right now, and then we start to essentially resist parts of ourselves because we're like, oh, I don't want to be that way because I want to be this way. So I shouldn't do those things. I should be doing this thing. And so when we create that resistance within ourselves, ultimately we are cutting off parts of ourselves. Like there's parts of yourselves that you don't like I'm overweight, or hey, I got this big old mole on my ass and that I don't like. And so I'm going to shut off energy from there because basically I'm trying to deny that because I want to get rid of it. So first and foremost is just allowing yourself to embrace the entirety of your current experience, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it might be painful, even if you don't necessarily like what you're seeing, like what you're experiencing, allowing yourself to just embrace it and be with it completely, because then you can remove that resistance. Because really change, in my experience, comes down to this process of learning how to love yourself. Because the more you learn how to love yourself and learn how to love all parts of yourself, the more your sense of self begins to expand, because you start to see yourself in everything else. And you start to see the connection between, your physical body. Again, just like the food that you eat and the water that you drink, it comes from something that's seemingly out there. But if it wasn't there, we wouldn't be able to have this experience in here. So we have this connection, just like, being in relationship. If we didn't have that experience of being in relationship, we wouldn't even know that we existed, because we need that split. We need that condition and that illusion of separation to even have an experience of what we believe ourselves to be. So I think when it comes to change, that's one thing I've learned, first and foremost, because the times that I'm fighting myself because I'm trying so hard to change, I'm trying so hard to get somewhere, I'm actually holding myself back because I'm not allowing myself to just be. Again, going back to the beingness part of the equation of just being, as if I can feel that experience, if I just love and accept myself completely and totally in this moment, and I love myself so much that I want the best for myself. And so I'm choosing to make these changes in my life so that I can be the best for myself. And then kind of on a practical level, I like to think of like a bow and arrow is kind of an analogy that's helped me, where you have your target, which essentially that's like your intention, that's your goal, that's your dream, that's your target. And then you use your will and you use your focus to aim and to draw back the bow. And so you use your will to take action in your life to actually, do something, I want to get in better shape. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm not just going to think about it. I'm going to use my will and I'm going to use my focus to focus on that intention. But then once I've done the work and once I've kind of put the structure in place, once I've aimed at the target, at some point you just have to let go. And then whatever the outcome is going to be is what it's going to be. You also got to remember the kind of the deeper thread of, at least in my own personal conception, we're all on our own individual paths. Like our souls have chosen to come into this incarnation to create a certain experience so that it can create different catalysts and create different circumstances to continue to grow and to continue to evolve and ultimately to continue to experience more of what it is as essentially a oneness with everything else. And so we, in a sense, we kind of choose our challenges in that way. And then because we choosing those challenges in that way, we can also choose how we navigate through them and choose how we grow through them, which again, you can choose to not take personal responsibility and victimize yourself and blame other people, or you can choose like, hey, I have a part in this. I'm going to do what I can, what's in my, influence to make changes and to move forward. But again, it's not coming out of this place of lack, because that goes back to the abundance theme. It's not coming out of this place of lack. It's more so coming out of this place of, again, for me, it's like, because I love myself so much, because I want the best for myself, I'm choosing to engage in these different habits, and I'm choosing to maybe disengage from things that aren't serving what I feel like is my, purpose or mission, or the things that provide meaning and fulfillment for me in my life.
I want to clear something up. The love myself thing, a lot of people have taken that and just like mopped the dirty floor with it, and like, I'm just a piece of shit and I love myself. And that's one of the things where I think like this new, I don't even know what the fuck to call that. I think it's idiocracy, where it's like, hey, I am unhealthy. I engage in bad habits, but fuck it, I love myself. And that's not what, loving yourself really means. It's what you just said. It's, I care about myself so much that I'm going to do the hard thing and stop eating this food. I'm going to do the hard thing and plan my day out so I have enough time to get to the things I've committed to. It's not the opposite. Hey, I'm not going to go to the gym. Fuck it, I love myself. Hey, I didn't do the things I was supposed to. I love myself. I'm good. You know what I mean? Just want to clear that up for everybody out there.
It's like the ego creating stories of self-love to maintain its idea and level of comfort. Because in my experience, and the more that you learn to love yourself, the more your sense of self expands. And so you realize what you're doing to yourself, you're doing to everything and everyone else, and vice versa. What you're doing to everyone and everything else, you're ultimately doing to yourself.
Yeah, I love it. I wanted to ask as well, we kind of talked about like these concepts of like abundance, these concepts of empathy, compassion, and gratitude. Do you think that this is, the positive things that come out of that, are they because we start to change our perspective? Are we seeing these changes because our subconscious is noticing, hey, Miguel is doing A, B, and C now. Okay, I'm going to allow him to see these opportunities now. Or is it, I should say, is it spinning the cosmic wheel, so to speak? Is it plug in this, God says, good, you gave me compassion, I give you this opportunity? Or is it a little bit of both?
It's a good question. I recently was studying the law of one, and in there the questioner asks essentially, is it all just destiny, or where's that balance of free will and destiny? And I really like the way that Raw, kind of the channel entity, put it. Was like, it's like going to a grocery store. It's essentially like your soul chooses which store you go to, but you have the free will to choose anything out of that grocery store. And so we have all of these choices, and we can, we can choose to make changes to better ourselves. We can choose to engage in things that, create more dysfunction and imbalance within ourselves. And it's not this, right, wrong, good or bad situation. It's just choices, and choices cause reactions. Just like, the law of karma, it's like action, reaction. And so when we choose to engage, like you said, like in compassion or in gratitude, and essentially these things that allow us to create a deeper and deeper sense of connection and love with ourselves and others, then the reaction of that is we get more of that back. As like Paul Chek says, love is a boomerang. So if you're putting that out, then you're going to call that back into you. Whereas if you're choosing to engage in other things that are, making you unhealthy or whatever that looks like, creating more of what you don't want in your life, then you're just going to keep getting that back to yourself. But ultimately, again, it's in the big grand scheme of things, it's not like you're inherently doing anything right or wrong. You're just making choices. And there's I don't know what the name was, but it was like a great shaman once said, it's like you only have two choices to heal, now or later. So it's like eventually, whether it's this lifetime, whether it's the next, whether it's, hundreds of lifetimes later, because we're all on our own path that are of evolution. It's like eventually you get to the point of awareness to realize that, oh, I'm creating these things for myself. All these things I say I don't like, all these things that I might be, blaming other people for, or distracting myself from or numbing myself from. I have a hand in creating all of these things. And as Osho says, if you're truly aware of something, meaning it's not just this intellectual awareness, but like just full experience awareness, then you won't do it, or you're going to keep doing it because it's something that is life affirmative, something that is affirmative to your own path of development.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that it's kind of, you plant the seed and this comes out. If you do the consistent things, you're going to get what comes out of that.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I do still believe that there are certain things that we call to ourselves because we kind of we have a greater purpose, developing cancer, for instance. Like you might take somebody does everything right, as far as, they're eating right, they're managing their 4 doctors, they're, engaging in healthy relationships, they're managing their mind and their emotions, and yet they develop cancer, and they develop like terminal cancer. And in that sense, again, that might be exactly what was supposed to happen, because there might be some kind of either karmic lesson. Because again, if you're thinking about lifetimes, like even things in our past, even though when you kind of start to get in these realms, like time space doesn't really match up in the way that we view it. But, if you think about just linearly, like things in our past that we may have kind of incurred this action reaction, again, we may have sowed some kind of seed, many lifetimes ago, and now it's manifesting itself in our current experience. And so, but also, we also have a hand in how we're interacting with others. Like a kid that is born with some kind of deformity that ultimately teaches its parents compassion and love and patience. And it's like that was the purpose. So yes, I think it's kind of this both and situation.
Both and. Okay, cool. Just because I have it, like, it's so funny. Every time I feel like, I do something like the slightest that I felt like maybe I shouldn't have done. Like literally, again, I'm very like empathic. So again, I'm very like, even small things kind of like, ooh, I noticed that. Like I kind of did this because I was being selfish, or I was, etc. The next thing that happens to me that is not good, I'm like, fuck, I should have done that.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, hold on. I'm lucky enough to be aware of both feelings and being aware at both times of, of the spectrum. So I'm able to be like, did I just perceive this because of that? So sometimes I'm just like, oh boy, I wonder if somebody else has felt that too. But it's a little bit of both, 100%. I wanted to touch on, Joe Dispenza has, this quantum connection type of thing. Are you familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza's work?
Yeah, I haven't got super deep into his work, but, enough to be familiar with it, yes.
Okay. He just said something that, you kind of reminded me of, which was, like time and space don't really kind of connect. And I engage in prayer And I kind of just want to know what you think. In his book, he kind of explained how, I'm still super confused about it, which is why I kind of wanted to ask you if you knew something about this, was that people were praying in this study for people in the past. And like somehow they monitored like effects from that or something like that. And, you know, I do understand that space and time in the universe is very, again, so linear and very hard for us to conceptualize as a human. And I was wondering if, you know, you could kind of talk to about, you know, this quantum level of existence where, you know, again, non-linear.
Yeah. Cool. Before I get into that, I wanted to circle back because it kind of, I feel called to share when you were saying kind of the action reaction. One thing I've noticed is that there's the thing. So it's like, you know, you do something, you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. There's the thing in itself, just like if you eat something that maybe you know isn't the most ideal thing for you, but maybe it just kind of fulfilled like instant gratification. There's the thing, and then there's the story and the meaning that you place behind the thing. So like if I eat, you know, if I go and eat a bunch of ice cream right now, yeah, that might not be the best thing for me, but if I am also telling myself, yeah, yo, that was shit, I'm going to feel terrible, why did I do that? That in itself adds another layer. So I've kind of learned, which going back to your, you know, the action reaction, it's like now you're creating this extra story and this, you're adding additional stress to already something that may have been potentially stressful, which is putting more energy into the thing that you don't want, which is then going to come back to you. So I've kind of learned, and again, it's a constant practice, but I've learned like, if those kinds of things do happen, of just like, again, going back to the acceptance, but still willing to changeness. It's like, okay, I did that thing, it happened, you know, whatever it was, and I can just allow it to be what it is. I don't have to, you know, put extra meaning or stories behind it. It's just accept the isness of it. And for me, that's kind of like, it diminishes maybe the, you know, what we'd perceive as the negative or the reaction from that thing. So I just felt called to share that because I've experienced that a lot.
No, I appreciate that because you know, everybody has like, I think as people that are trying to develop and are trying to like be the best they can be and be the best version of themselves, they hold themselves up to such a high standard that like even the little things, they could be like, fuck, I can't believe I did it. You know, we all go unconscious for whatever part of the day because of stress, you're tired, and then you go a little unconscious, you do this thing. And then since you know you're on this journey that you've been like putting a lot of effort in, you kind of like beat yourself down a lot versus someone who particularly isn't on that same kind of journey and they could eat a whole tub of ice cream instead of being like, shit, I can't believe I did that. They said, shit, I'm the shit. I just had the best ice cream of my life. I'm fucking living it up. And, you know, so it's very interesting.
Well, this kind of segues right into the question. It's like kind of getting into the quantum level of things because, you know, there's stories of, you know, like people that are living to 90, 100 years old and they've been smoking cigarettes their whole life, or they've been, you know, I think I saw this one thing, this like 96-year-old lady just been drinking Dr. Pepper her whole life. And yeah, she was like kind of making fun. Her doctor told her to stop. And she was like, he died before I did. I got the real doctor right here.
I got the real doctor.
But yeah, it's like, again, the meaning that you place behind those things. And when it comes, again, like the quantum level of things, because when you keep kind of peeling back the layers of the onion, like if you go all the way to the atom, just as an instance, you know, in a single atom is essentially, it's like 99.99999, like a bunch of 9% empty space. So it's like, even what we think of as this physical, like I can touch it, I can smell it, I can hear it, I can feel it, I can taste it. Even what we think of as this physical experience is in reality is 99.99999% empty space. And so at a fundamental level, it's all energy and information. So it's kind of as like as a prelude, Because when I kind of ask myself these questions and kind of, go on these thought experiments, I always kind of remind myself of the basic principles of things. And the way that I kind of first learned to conceptualize this in a way that at least made sense for me was actually Conversations with God. It was Neil, I forget his name, but it was a book. But essentially in there, he referred to, maybe it wasn't even him, maybe this is my own thing, but either way, like I think of, like GTA, Grand Theft Auto, the video game, and how, like, and kind of we, bring it back old school a little bit, like on the PS2, you actually got the disc, everything's now, you just download it now. But when you had the disc, and like this disc essentially has the entire game on it. And so that disc, you can hold that disc, and every single move that you can make, every single thing that you could do, past, present, future, is present right there on the disc.
Oh shit, yeah. Wow, I never thought of it that way. Fuck.
But when you play the game, the character, was it CJ? I don't even know what his name was. But when you play the game, he doesn't necessarily have the awareness that he's being played. It's like he's going through, he's doing things, he's having these actions, reactions, he's making his choices, even though you're the one behind it playing the game. But anything that he could possibly do, or anything that he has ever done, is already there. It's already been programmed into the game. So when you think about like praying for somebody's, like praying for something in the past, it's essentially you're just taking, kind of, if you just think of your current location right now here in time space, you're just taking that certain point and then you're just putting energy into another piece of the game. Which, we're used to thinking in terms of distances. Like I can travel from, Indiana, I can go and travel west and end up in LA. But at that level, like the same thing is true in time. Because again, in the big picture of things, everything that already happened and everything that already will happen is already present right here and right now. Because it's all part of this, again, this one game of a potential infinite number of games that we can play. Like you can put in a different game, and the same kind of idea. And so if you can, you pray for the past, you're praying in that different point in time space that can have an influence coming back into the present. Just in the same way you can pray to your future self. And there's actually in the law of one, they kind of talk about this where, the experience that we're having right now, there's like kind of what they call, like what you'd call your higher self. It's like your higher self is in a sense coming back into time to create the experience that it needs to ultimately end up where it already is in the, so-called future.
Yeah. Jeez.
And so I know it's crazy.
I love that, dude. That's one of like life's mysteries I hope I can like really understand, because I feel like that's one of like the most mysterious and like just wonders of whatever this is. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, I mean, if you go in a deep enough psychedelic experience, you might find it there. But even in meditation, I've been there sometimes where it's like everything for me, it's like I'll hear the birds, and then all of a sudden it's like the birds are a part of me. The birds are a part of my experience. And so it's like that sense of self starts to dissolve, and that's the condition. And once like the sense of self starts to dissolve, then so does that sense of kind of the time and space and location, because like your location starts to dissolve. And the only way to have time, if you just think about it logically, is the only way to have time is you need space, and then you need things, you need matter to be able to move in space. Because the only reference we have for time is, okay, that thing went from here over to there, and I was able to kind of measure the amount of time that elapsed. And if everything is one thing, then there's no reference point to see that thing moving from here to there because it's all the same thing. It's all one thing. And so then time disappears because there's no more reference point. But yeah, it's crazy stuff. Again, you can like intellectualize, but then being able to, have the direct experience of it is another thing, which I still like, I'm a smart guy, so I can sound cool and intellectualize these things, but it's still like, even me, like having these different, like, what does that actually feel like? What is that experience?
Experience feels, I feel like you know more through the experience,
Mm-hmm. It's a knowing.
It's a knowing versus like a understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that a lot with, just spirituality. Like, all the ins and out of it, but not having like this, like, oh, fuck, I feel that. Like, whoa, like, okay, now I get it. I've been there once through a psychedelic trip too, where it's like everything just kind of paused, went, choo! And I was like, oh shit. It's a trip. So thank you for being on, man. I kind of want to end with, we talked literally everything, space-time, the self, and I wanted to get your opinion on aliens and dinosaurs, because that shit was on our time zone. It was on the CD player, so to speak. And, what do you think about the things that we can only fucking think about and daydream about that potentially are real? Like, how do we explain all these just crazy shit that are on this disc?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And there's a couple different ways to approach that. And again, this is stuff that I have like intuitive feelings about, and I'm only recently kind of being able to put words around, because again, when we just think about being able to communicate in the English language, like it can be a seemingly very limited way of communication, because there's so many things that we like know, just like if you like love, you can have that experience, you can have that knowing, but then somebody might ask you like, can you explain what that feels like? And you're just like, it just feels like love. Like, I don't know. But yeah, like when it comes to, we'll kind of start with like the aliens. So I think when people think about aliens, they think about, because so much of what we think about, we reference to our current experience. Like, so we have this reference point of this like 3D physical reality that we're used to and that we're accustomed to. And so when we think about, extraterrestrial beings or aliens, I think we automatically assume that they are also having this 3D physical reality in the same way that we are experiencing it. And which, I think there is truth behind that. I think there are instances of that. But then you also have to think about, okay, how many other kinds of dimensions are there where entities can exist, but not necessarily in this physical form? And the easiest way to like, kind of think about that is if you just take a thought. Like a thought, you can't really weigh it, you can't measure it. But if you think something enough, it has a way of finding itself manifesting in the physical reality. Just like an egregore is essentially this thought form that's created its own kind of sustainability. It's created its own life form and is able to implant itself in other beings. And if you just like think about your thought, you become aware of your thoughts during the day. Sometimes you'll have these like random thoughts where it's like, I have no idea where this even came from. And it's also like the whole concept of, like the 4-minute mile, for example, where it's like, it was once thought, okay, that's physically impossible. Human beings just physically cannot do that. And then one guy did it. And this was like before, the internet, before like, hey bro, check out, this guy just did a 4-minute mile. I'm like, I'm going to do it too. It's like before even all of that, one guy did a 4-minute mile. And then like, I don't know what the time was, but then shortly after, somebody else did a 4-minute mile. And it's even like, I find this because I've been getting more and more into music as well. Even like within music, like certain kind of creative things where it's like, there may be totally disconnected genres, totally on other sides of the world, or just not connected whatsoever. But it's like you kind of, once this idea complex is out there, it's like it becomes more accessible to the collective. It's kind of the Akashic records, where it's like the information is all right there. It's just we don't necessarily access it all. But when we do, like if one person has this download, then now it starts to become more readily available to other people. There's even the whole concept of spirituality, where it's like, 10 years ago, the shit that people are just talking about in passing, like, oh, it's all God, I am God. 10 years ago, be like, bro, what the fuck? Like, all right. But now it's just like, you open up Instagram and, depending on who you follow, obviously, but it's just like, oh, yeah, we're all God, bro. Duh.
Yeah.
But yeah, with the aliens, kind of coming from that background. And again, they talk about this in the Law of One, which, if you want to get deeper into this, you really got to like be with it, because it can be kind of technical and complex. But if you like, be with it, if you take the time to sit with it, they kind of talk about how there's these different densities and how, different entities can live on these different densities. Just like, kind of like the concept of your soul. Like your soul, it isn't necessarily this physical thing. And there's also the argument like, is the soul inside of you, or are you inside your soul? But this is the same thing, like on these different densities, these different levels, these different dimensions. So you can have these entities that come through and have communication, just like thought forms can be implanted in our kind of 3D physical reality. And, again, depending on what your definition of an alien is, you can call that was an alien. This kind of entity came from this other dimension outside of our current, solar system, and was able to kind of penetrate and, be with what we are right now. I mean, in that sense, there's aliens all around us.
Yeah. So that means we could be aliens as well if we're able to like elevate or whatever, just guide our direction somewhere else, or guide our consciousness somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole, like the concept of remote viewing, where it's like Paul Chek talks about it, in his experiences. Like when he goes to the sun, it's not that he's actually traveling to the sun. It's just he's just putting his intention on the sun that's already inside of him, because it's all there, just like it's all on the game board. So you're just directing your consciousness. So like the way that these entities travel isn't necessarily by, oh, I'm going to hop in my spaceship and I'm going to go somehow travel, at this super over the speed of light to get over to this other planet that's however many light years away and like land. It's like, no, I can just direct my intention. I can use my intention to direct my consciousness into this other, time space reality. And in that sense, I can choose to show up as a physical being that other physical beings can have an interaction with. And that's where you kind of get all these, like the sightings and the things like that, which on the other end of the spectrum, you also have to, look at, well, how much of this is a portrayal of our own unconscious? Because I'm also reading, I forget what the name is now, but he's talking about how, like people that have past trauma and they have a UFO encounter or some kind of encounter, that it can even be argued that is a projection of their unconscious from some kind of past traumatic experience that they've had, that they are just allowing to bubble up. They're kind of like a dream. Because again, you can argue, is this all a dream? It's like the video game. It's like, are we just being played by somebody, that we're not aware that we're just a character in a video game, or we're just inside of this dream? So I know it's crazy. You can play around with all these different thought experiments, but the cool thing is, like, at least for me, is you don't have to have the answer. Like half the fun is in the mystery, because you're always searching, and you always know at a deep level that the answer is always like right here, right now. but still you have fun playing the game for the sake of playing the game.
Yeah. Let's leave it at that. I think I love that, being able to hold both polarities of deep mystery, but at the same time, like, well, I'm here right now. I got shit to do. Let's go.
Let's go.
Yeah.
All right, brother.
All right. Thank you, brother. Thank you so much for being on, man. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. I really appreciate it.